I'm Effie, and in this video I'm going to be going through the very best books that I read in 2024. Unlike the rest of my end of year listicle videos, so my worst, my surprising, my disappointing, this one is not going to be in any particular order. I really tried to figure out a ranking for these and I couldn't even begin to figure out which was the best of the best. So I'm just going to talk about them. There are 16 books on this list because I couldn't even narrow it down to 10, unlike the other lists. Well, actually, technically there's 18 because there's 2 honourable mentions. So we'll just talk about those honourable mentions first. So the reason we have honourable mentions is that I started the year by reading my best friend, whose channel is Head in the Books. I started the year by reading her best and worst of 2024. So it felt dishonest. I don't know if dishonest is the right word, but it didn't feel quite authentic to put those books on this list because I was already set up to love them. Like, they were her best of the previous year. So those 2 books are Bright Young Woman by Jessica Knoll and Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas. I thought they were both absolutely fantastic books. So Bright Young Women is a reconceptualizing of, well, it's like loosely inspired, I think, by the Ted Bundy murders, but instead of placing the focus on the criminal, it places the focus solely on the victims. It's a beautiful book, but it's also a very heartbreaking book, and I absolutely loved starting my year with it. And then Cemetery Boys is following a trans boy who wants to prove himself to the brew hexes of his family and ends up in the middle of this kind of dark scheme where boys are going missing or murdered. It's cute, it's heartwarming, you can really feel the Latinx culture coming through it. I just really had a fantastic time with it. And on to the 16 books that are on my list because I read them off my own back and I loved all of them. So first off, we have Law and Lust by Colin Nicole. This might be the first vampire book on this list because it is the first book on this list, but it certainly is not going to be the last. So this is a contemporary, well, it's set in contemporary Britain mostly. There's a little bit of Japan in there. And we are following this vampire who, within the society of vampires, is like the highest rank of vampires. Basically, this sort of hierarchy where the absolute like nobility, the peak of blood drinking, is from other vampires. And if historically people in your family have drank from not vampires or like lower nobility vampires, then you are lower down on the pecking order, and it kind of takes generations for that to sort of filter out of your system, I guess. So this is following this vampire who has been quite isolated because everyone sees him as this like high-ranking vampire and they want to get close to him, but just because he is a high-ranking vampire. And he's looking for a blood source and he needs another high-ranking vampire to drink from. So he strikes up this deal with this other vampire and they start off as friends, and it slowly develops into more. It's very cute. There's a really beautiful slow burn to it. There's this gorgeous, like, usually obviously anachronisms don't work, but it works really effectively in this book where vampire society feels frozen in time, so that you have this anachronistic thing of it feels almost Victorian in its nature, but it's set in present day because that's just how rooted in the past, vampire society is, but then at the same time, because they are vampires and, you know, long-lived and all of that, queerness is very much normalized. So you see this very like queer normative society within sometimes less than accepting of queerness society. There were just so many aspects of it that worked so beautifully for me, and I was so excited to start to read this series in 2024. The next book I've got is Only a Monster by Vanessa Len, but if I'm being completely honest, this represents both of the books that are released in this series so far. So not only Only a Monster, but also Never a Hero. So we're following this young woman called Joan, who, after an accident results in her travelling several hours forward in time, she discovers that she is a monster. And within London, there are various different monster families, and each monster family has its own specific power, but they all share the ability to be able to travel through time by stealing life from humans. And then it just so happens that the same night that this is all revealed, she ends up coming face to face with some monster hunters, and it has catastrophic impact on her life, to the point that she then is forced to flee back in time to the 90s alongside this other monster. And she is trying to figure out how she can stop the events that she experienced from happening, whilst also coming to terms with the fact that time travel is reliant on her stealing life, and she has all these ethical implications as a result of that. Unusually for me, there is a love triangle that I don't hate. In fact, I really like it, and I think part of that is because you genuinely have no idea who Joan is going to end up with, and you end up rooting for both of these love interests as well. And then Never a Hero just takes the story so beyond that in a really interesting direction, to the point that I am now gasping for book 3, and I'm so glad it's finally coming out in 2025, because I need to know what happens next. And there's so many unanswered questions, but in a way that as a reader is quite satisfying. Like, it's not, oh, why are you keeping me on the hook for these things for so long? It's, I just need to know. I just need to spend more time in this world enjoying everything that this author has written, because it's so cleverly crafted and they are so bingeable as well. For Real by Alexis Hall is the third book in the Spires series, and these are all contemporary romances, and they all have quite a bit of emotional weight to them. I had a really difficult time picking which book from this series I was going to put on this list, because, you know, there's no real rules to what you put on your list, but I try to keep it to, I don't know if I've got any double entries for any authors this year, but I try to keep it as like one author or one book from a series. And obviously there's a couple entries on this list that represent multiple books in a series. But in the end, I decided that For Real was my favourite book in the Spire series. But honestly, like, I just love this series as a whole. So in For Real, we're following a 19-year-old Dom and a sub who is in his late 30s, I believe. So there is this sort of implicit power imbalance between them, and obviously there's an age gap. But Hall is very self-aware of that when writing it, and the characters address it multiple times throughout the book. I also think that the power dynamic works really well, because you've got these characters that obviously their age difference creates a dynamic, but then the fact that one's a dom and one is a sub creates a difference. It's a, you know, it gets a bit smutty, as you might guess from a dom sub book, but it's also an incredibly tender book, and it deals with some difficult topics at the same time, like grief and difficult parental dynamics are one of the aspects of the book. And I also just really enjoyed being able to read the annotations that Hall has included in this re-release of this book, and seeing the thought process behind a lot of these really powerful and beautiful moments. And I'm never going to look at Lemon Meringue Pie the same again. Honey by Isabel Banter is a book that I think has been not really marketed as well as it could, because I feel like a lot of the marketing and publicity around it has kind of focused on 90s nostalgia girl groups, and to me that's not what this story is. This is a story about a young girl who enters the entertainment industry when she is, I think she's 17 when she enters the industry, but very quickly is 18. Or at least she's that age when her star starts to rise. And it's the way that her sexuality is used as part of the marketing, except her sexuality is just that she wasn't a virgin. That was like the extent of it. But there's so much focus on kind of sexualizing her, and the way that she is referred to as honey throughout it. But then throughout the book, she goes on this journey of sort of embracing who she is, developing, growing. Her journey is not easy at times, but it is so beautiful to follow her throughout her musical career. And what I think this author's done spectacularly is deliberately evolved her voice through the story. So when you first meet her, she's a young girl. I think she's maybe like 8 years old. And she very much reads more youthful, more naive. But as she gets older throughout the story, her voice does feel more complex. And there's just something so gorgeous about her whole character arc that I was just so on board for from start to finish. And the ending of this book, oh, so satisfying. I Am AI by Ai Jiang is a book that feels like it's set not too far in the future, where in order to compete with AI, a woman has to pretend that she herself is AI. And the consequences of that on her physically and mentally are hard, for want of a better word, because apparently I don't have a better word right now. And there's so much nuance to the story that I really liked, but yet somehow Jiang has managed to make this quite a hopeful and optimistic story, despite the somewhat dark surrounding narrative. Long Live Evil by Sarah Rees Brennan was, I don't know, like, I want to say it was a surprise, but at the end of the day, like, I'm not picking up books that I expect to dislike. Well, not generally anyway. But I think sometimes there's a gulf between a book you pick up thinking you're going to enjoy and a book that somehow manages to blow all your expectations out of the water because it is that good. And that's what this book is. So the basic premise of this book is a woman is, on her deathbed, about to die, and she gets offered this opportunity to go into the world of her favourite book series. And, she's not really thinking that's actually what's going to happen, but it does. Except she is put into the position of one of the villains of the story, and this villain is about to be executed. So she has to plot and scheme and use her knowledge of the story to come out on top. Except she's never actually read the first book, so it's all based on assumptions. So that alone is a really enticing and exciting story. But add into that the fact that there's a lot of meta-analysis about the genre of fantasy as a whole and the tropes that are often present in this genre. There's discussion about, you know, the Madonna whore complex. There's the way that male characters can be treated differently than female characters in the narrative. And then there's also just gorgeous, lyrical, poetical discussions of wanting to carry out sexual acts with one another. Like, I can't remember the exact line, but it's like, I want to kneel at the altar of you, or something like that. It's absolutely gorgeous. And it's funny as well. And then you get to the end of the book and go, oh, I was so stupid to not see that coming. And, oh, so good. Sister Made a Monster by Lucy A. Snyder is a book that features a pandemic post-COVID. And the result of this pandemic is essentially that women are disproportionately affected. And there's an undercurrent of, it's not that they are like biologically disproportionately affected, but that there is medical sexism occurring. So this book is broken down into 3 interconnected narratives of these 3 different women and the impact that this pandemic and, you know, getting the virus has upon them. You see the way that they contract the virus, and then you see the aftermath of what this virus does to them. It's a really weird book. Like, it is cosmic horror. It goes dark, it goes gruesome, and it's just all round delightful to read in a, you know, gruesome, gory, cosmic horror kind of way. His Mate by Vengeance by Mel Hs is the first book in the Lunetti Pack series, which follows a group of werewolves, well, a pack of werewolves that are part of this city where 3 different magical communities control 3 different crime aspects. So the wolf pack control the arms, the witches control the drugs, and the vampire coven control the human trafficking. So in this book, we have a werewolf and a vampire, and the vampire's been set up to look like he attempted to assassinate the leader of the coven. So the werewolves take him in and keep him in a safe house, and this wolf is tasked with essentially being his bodyguard. But he doesn't like vampires. Vampires killed his family, and he wants nothing to do with this vampire. But when they meet, there's this immediate attraction, and the banter between them is out of this world. And it's so fun to see their walls break down and them slowly fall for each other, and the way that they have each other's backs over everything else. Yeah, it's just such a good book. Odd Spirits by S.T. Gibson is a novella that comes before the events of the rest of the Summoner's Circle series. It's quite a quiet story, as it's following a married couple when they're in the infancy of their marriage, as they battle with some kind of force that is taking over their home. And it's a book about love, really. The love that you have for your partner, and the way that sometimes you can love your partner so much that you don't want to let them down. You don't want to be seen as this imperfect person because you don't feel worthy. But it's tender, it's powerful, and it's just overall a beautiful story. Shoestring Theory by Mariana Costa follows a warlock. Is that what he is? Sorry, the book's like literally right next to me, so I can just grab it. So this book follows Cyril Levere, who is the Royal Mage, I think is his proper title, and he is about to die, and he decides to do one big spell to give his death basically purpose, and he decides that he is going to go back in time and try to kill his estranged husband. So he goes back in time with the express purpose of murdering his husband before he becomes the tyrant that he ends up becoming. Except for magical reasons, the husband that he ends up meeting has also been sent back in time. So they are both their older selves in their younger bodies, and it's hilarious. It's beautiful to see them fall in love with one another, but also they carry all of the baggage of the mess they made of their lives together the first time round. There's a little bit of a, well, it describes it as a love quadrangle, but yeah, okay. Actually, yeah, let's call it a love quadrangle, because we've got the husband's sister and we've got a fiance, and it's beautifully messy, but not in a complex way, and very, very fun to read. And basically, once I started it, I just didn't want to put it down. I was having such a good time with it. Sargassa by Sophie Burnham asks the question, what if the Roman Empire had never fallen? So we are following a young woman who has just been thrust into the role of imperial historian, which is a hereditary role. So she now has this role because her father has been assassinated. So a large portion of the story is revolving around finding out who assassinated her father, but also, as she is now imperial historian, she has been given this mysterious object known as the Evora stone. I probably butchered how that's pronounced. And suddenly everyone wants this item. And you're following multiple characters. So you're obviously following this young girl who is now the imperial historian. You are following someone who she had an almost romance with as a young woman, and then things went sideways. You are following her half brother, who sort of lives half within like fancy society and half very much like a pleb, and he is this weird sort of halfway. You're following the leader of the rebellion, and oh gosh, I'm sure there's at least one other character, and I can't believe I'm forgetting. But they all, essentially this like almost policeman guy, and he's very much like just following orders, and all of these narratives weave together to give a really interesting whole picture of this society, and it has some fantastic twists and turns that you sort of half guess, but you don't truly see the full scope of it until all of the pieces are laid out onto the board. And it's a very promising start to a series that I am excited to continue reading. The Bloodless Princes by Charlotte Bond is the sequel to The Fireborn Blade. I'm not sure if this is a duology. It very much, at the end of this book, you do feel like you have the complete story, but I wouldn't be mad if we got more from this world. And honestly, it was a bit of a toss-up between putting the Bloodless Princes or the Fireborn Blade in my best. So kind of see it as representing both. But I like this one slightly more. This is a story that's kind of vaguely inspired by Orpheus and Eurydice. There are also dragons. I don't know if you can quite see that kind of cat-like character. I loved her in this book. And it's such a gorgeously complex built world, and in the Fireborn Blade you had these little extracts about previous encounters with dragons that really set up the story. And then you had this reveal that was really interesting when that finally got kind of unraveled. And then I just loved how, like, very feminist and very sapphic the Bloodless Princess was. And it was one of those books that, like, once I picked up, I didn't want to put down. I was completely absorbed into the world. Keep It in the Dark by Justin Arnold is a vampire hunter story, and it is a YA book. So we're following a vampire prince who is sent to an elite boarding school to prove that he can blend in with human society before he is sent on diplomatic missions. And he ends up having to share a room with the headmaster's son, who very quickly gets sucked into the world of vampire hunters. So it's a little bit of like putting their differences aside. There's an immediate attraction between them, but they also hate each other's guts. And it's really fun to see their friendship develop and then that develop into more. There's a little bit of exploring of sexuality as the headmaster's son character is coming to terms with that. I think it's very much a case of, like, he started the story having a kind of inkling, but through his attraction to his new roommate, he really started to explore his feelings around his sexuality. And I loved the way that vampirism was used as a very clear metaphor for queerness, and the way that queerness can be stigmatized for something that is immutable. And I very much want to go and read more from this author, because he truly has a skill at writing that I just want to live more in the worlds that he's created. Corporate Mandated Holiday Romance by Nellie Wilson was a surprise to me. I think partially because I am a bit of a Grinch around Christmas, which feels even sillier to say because the next book on this list is also a holiday romance. But in this book, we are following a woman who believes she's just got her dream job, to realise that actually her boss is really sleazy, and the company she thought was doing good environmentally is actually carrying out a lot of greenwashing. So she engages in a fake dating plot with a journalist that she's met through her roommate, and they do that so he can access the company's like holiday events and find out more juice to be able to break this story about how bad this company is. And there's this slow building attraction with these two characters, as usually is the case with fake dating. But it's also a case of them exploring things that are important to each other. So he is Jewish and she's learning a lot about his faith, and she's teaching him about different aspects of Christmas. Like, they go through different Christmas songs and they have a giggle about what each of the Christmas songs mean and how silly some of them are. And there's such a mutual respect between these characters. Also, I just really loved Max, who is the journalist character. I just really loved him and wanted more from him when the story was over. Set the Record Straight by Hannah Bonham Young is another fake dating, but this one is sapphic, where these two best friends agree to pretend to be dating because one of them's just got what she believes to be her dream job, but her boss mistakes her for being queer and she doesn't want to kind of come across as a gay fraud. So best friend's like, well, you could just pretend to be dating me. And then her best friend, who already knew that she was gay, wants to show her ex that she is well adapted and has moved on because her ex cheated on her with one of their co-workers and they're now together and it's a whole mess. Why this worked so well? Because their neurodivergencies meant that the communication was top tier. I don't think I've ever seen communication with characters in a book quite so well done as this. I think before this, the best communication I'd seen in a book was Boyfriend Material by Alexis Hall, but this is so much beyond that, and that is saying something. Also, the way that they had compassion around each other's neurodivergencies and supported each other was just so beautiful to read. And the final one on my list, we have Lightfall by Ed Crocker. This is a No Humans Here book where we have sorcerers, vampires and werewolves, and we're trying to uncover what happened with the death of the leader of this vampire territory's youngest son, and there's all kinds of weird and wonderful things happening within this vampire society that we are trying to get to the bottom of. This is such an elaborately built world where it's very clear that Crocker has put in a lot of thought into the dynamics of this world, the lore, everything around it. We have passages of, you know, books around the lore. We have songs. We have a brilliant, dry British sense of humour throughout, and just overall a very compelling story. There are still some questions to be answered by the series, which you would expect because it is a trilogy. But by the end of the book, you have a lot of questions being answered, and it was just really interesting and engaging to read. So those are my top 16 books that I've read in 2024. And since I could not rank them, I thought it might be fun if we did a book bracket to try and figure out which one is going to be the top book of 2024. Obviously, this isn't going to be perfect and it's just going to be fun, but you know, let's try and pick which one is the best of 2024. Okay, so I've grabbed my laptop, so let's start this bracket up. Let's find the thing that okay, so first up, between Honey and Law and Lust. It's going to be Law and Lust. Keep in the Dark and Lightfall, two vampire books. Keep It in the Dark. For Real and His Mate by Vengeance. His Mate by Vengeance? That was actually quite a hard one. Sagassa and the Bloodless Princes. Sagassa. Law and Lust versus Keep It in the Dark. Now this might be recency biases, but I'm going to say Keep It in the Dark. His Mate by Vengeance versus Sagassa. Oh, that's evil. Sagassa. And Keep It in the Dark versus Sagassa. I don't know why I didn't see this coming, but I didn't. Sagassa. Set the Record Straight versus IMAI. Set the Record Straight. I did click that, right? Did I click it? Yes. Well, I have now. Sister Made a Monster versus Only a Monster. We have a monster round. Only a Monster. Long Live Evil versus Corporate Mandated Holiday Romance. This is genuinely like coin toss territory. Corporate Mandated Holiday Romance. Odd Spirits versus Shoestring Theory. Shoestring Theory. Set the Record Straight versus Only a Monster. Well, that's just evil. Set the Record Straight. Corporate Mandated Holiday Romance versus Shoestring Theory. Like, I'm kind of tempted to say Corporate Mandated Holiday Romance just because then it'd be like two holiday romances against each other. Where Shoestring Theory was just so fun I mean, they were both fun, but like Corporate Mandated Holiday Romance is serious, whereas Shoestring Theory is just a romp, even though it's about going back in time and killing your husband. I'm gonna go Shoestring Theory. Okay, Set the Record Straight versus Shoestring Theory. This is so hard. Like, oh, I don't know. Okay, Shoestring Theory. Coin toss though. Sagasa versus Shoestring Theory. Like, they feel so like worlds apart, those two. Oh, what am I gonna go for? Sagasa, Shoestring Theory. I'm gonna go Shoestring Theory. So, as you can see on screen, this is the book bracket, but I mean it was basically difficult. That's not right words, but apparently Shoestring Theory was the best book that I read in 2024 according to that. Who knew? I hope you enjoyed this video. I would love to know your best book or books of 2024. Please do comment down below. But thank you for watching, and until next time, love you. Bye.